Welcome back to TinyBlueGames. My name's of course Csaw or Chris, and today we're talking about Guild Wars 2 in 2021. And we have some pretty exciting news to talk about. Now, I did do a video like a few days ago on Guild Wars 2, I think it was last Wednesday, where I talked about just kind of some of my thoughts about where the game might be going. It was a very speculative video, like I made that very clear that it wasn't based on fact or anything like that, and it really had to do with the continuation of the franchise, if Guild Wars 3 was going to be a thing, what End of Dragons actually meant, and just my own personal thoughts on it. And a lot of the viewers had their own thoughts on it as well. Some people were very excited to see a Guild Wars 3, some people are very against a Guild Wars 3 and think Guild Wars 2 has the legs to keep going, so there was definitely a really good conversation in the comments section. What's particularly interesting, though, is not a few days later, Arenanet seems to have its own reply to this, where they highlight the future of Guild Wars 2, and really, essentially, they doubled down on Guild Wars 2 itself. Now, we're going to go over the news post. I'm sure you've seen it already, and if you haven't seen it, I'm going to link the actual article in the description below. And that's the very first thing. This is quite a different video. This is not me speculating. This is based on a lot of actual information we're getting from the devs, which is always much more exciting because that, I don't know, is an actual window into their kind of side of things. And that's kind of how this whole thing opens. It opens with Ruby. I'm just going to post little clippets of the article while I just do some stuff in the background, so feel free to listen to the video if you'd prefer. But yeah, it opens with Ruby Bear, and she's kind of the host of Guild Chat and does some of the communication with the community. But overall, she gives some introductions, and she states that she enjoyed seeing the positive reaction they received with the Guild Wars 2 live summer 2021 blog post, which kind of was that blog post that outlined what we could expect in the summer. And even though it wasn't anything groundbreaking, just the idea that there was an actual roadmap was amazing. So they said they really enjoyed the feedback they saw from that and that they want to keep trying to do those kind of things. And I think that's absolutely the best thing for any developer, any developer. Even if you don't have good information, and some of the information in this blog post isn't necessarily quote unquote good, being truthful and sharing it as soon as you can makes it so much better. So that's kind of how this is set. That's the tone of this. Let's dive into the content. Alright, so the first part of this is called a brief preamble. So it says, "Hey everybody, please allow me to introduce myself. I'm JT, and I lead the Guild Wars franchise and Arenanet. I've been a director at the studio for a little over 6 years. Arenanet is different. It's unlike any place I've ever been a part of. I'm honored to be a part of this game, team, and community. When I stepped into this role, I thought a lot about what we've done well and what we still needed to do. That retrospective took me back to the studio's earliest days. Arenanet was founded with the goal of pursuing innovation by focusing on solving player problems first. Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2 are direct results of this pursuit. It's essential that this player-first approach is at the heart of everything we do going forward. Today, we will be sharing some important updates about our upcoming expansion, Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons, the live game, and some changes we're making to realign ourselves with the ideals that shaped the Guild Wars franchise from the very beginning. I believe that the best is yet to come for Guild Wars 2. So this is already a super powerful statement. First off, we're getting introduced to this JT character. I don't typically stay super focused on who the actual lead devs are and all that. I believe any kind of change in a game is more than one person's vision, but it is nice to hear someone kind of speak to the game and kind of give their overall philosophy and thoughts. And the very first thing here, they're looking back at what was the success of Guild Wars 2, because although Guild Wars 2 isn't the absolute most popular MMORPG, it's obviously had a tremendous amount of success, and certainly had a lot of success in very specific moments throughout its history. For example, its launch was particularly well received in terms of how the game was formatted. I mean, it was one of the first MMOs that didn't have a monthly sub fee. It was being very ambitious. So the idea that they're looking back at that stuff and seeing how can we really bring that back into the way we're designing things is great. The second thing, we talk about Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons, but we talk about Guild Wars 2, and the best of Guild Wars 2 is yet to come. So I think this is where a lot of people are taking kind of that, statement to mean that Guild Wars 2 is their passion, their focus, and it's here to stay for a while. And that's what really counteracts a lot of the speculation I had in my past video, where I was wondering if End of Dragons would lead to a Guild Wars 3 scenario. Well, as we see further down in this blog post, they're actually looking at making some improvements to Guild Wars 2 itself to help prepare it for the future. So it definitely looks like Guild Wars 2 is here to stay, which I'm super excited about because Guild Wars 2 is great. It really is. And if they want to double down on it, I'm all for that. All right, so from there, they go into Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons. This is kind of the portion that I thought was, more negative, but it's actually a really good thing in my opinion. And to be clear, I think the actual purpose of this entire blog post is this section right here. It's obviously developed in a way that they're kind of introducing something that could be framed as negative and putting it with a bunch of really good stuff as well. And overall, I'm super excited about everything that's being announced here. But let's read. So as expansion development has progressed and the real world challenges of the past year and a half have changed the way we live and work, it's become clear that we need a little more time to deliver our creative vision of for Cantha. As a result, we're delaying the release of Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons from late 2021 to early 2022. We appreciate your patience as we take the time to give the expansion the attention it deserves. I'm incredibly proud of the work the team is going to bring the team is doing to bring Cantha to life, and we can't wait for you to see and experience it for yourselves. Don't forget to tune in on July 27th for the Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons First Look livestream. So there you go, the expansion has been delayed. It's always sad when something you want to play gets delayed, but the delay isn't actually that big. It's going from the end of 2021 to early 2022. That being said, we didn't actually know when in 2021 it was supposed to come, so maybe if you thought it was going to be earlier, you're a little bit more upset, but I think this is actually a really good thing. The very first thing, we've seen so many MMOs recently try and launch expansions that aren't prepared. It's always better to wait and do it when it's ready. It's never, a case of like, thank goodness they released this early and it was horrible. No one's ever said that ever. So I think it's really good. The other really good news is that they are keeping the July 27th live stream. So they obviously have enough of it completed and developed that they're excited to talk about it. So I really take this as the start of their expansion marketing. Like, they know, hey, we have enough of the core concepts of the specializations and stuff like that ready for us to actually start sharing with people. I think ultimately what would have been good is if they had announced that they were working on a new expansion earlier than they did, but they actually held off on the details of the expansion, the initial idea of the release date and stuff like that, until a bit later on when they were absolutely sure that they were ready to launch. Like, that would have been the absolute perfect way of doing it, but I think the way they've handled things has been really well done, and I'm super excited to hear them talk about the expansion just in general. So I think this is great. I'm not terribly upset. All right, and now we're getting into what I think is the actually most exciting part of this entire blog post. A familiar face returns. A large part of my job is planning for the future. We have some big plans in store for Guild Wars 2, and ambitious plans require ambitious leaders. I knew I needed a partner to help share the load in order for us to achieve our long-term goals and deliver the game experience you deserve. And to kind of clear this up, and as I mentioned earlier in this, I'm not 100% tracking all of the devs like some people are super on top of who's where, but I know for a while Mike O'Brien was leading the show, and then someone called Mike Z took over for a while with kind of the post Path of Fire stuff. And I believe, once again, it seems to have kind of shifted. We didn't really know who was in charge. So it is good that they are talking about this, because I don't think, dev studios need to be super clear about this. But if they have been clear in the past, and then it's kind of up for debate who is the leader, like you haven't heard from someone in a while, it gets a little bit difficult. So the fact that they have been clear in the past means that they probably need to be clear in the future. And that looks like what they're doing here. So I needed someone who intimately understood the franchise and, most importantly, our players. With that, I'm thrilled to announce that former Guild Wars 2 game director Colin Johansson has returned to Arenanet to help co-lead the studio with me. All aboard, take it away, Colin. So they keep making these kind of hype train related references. There was a big meme, I think, around the release of Heart of Thorns, where Colin's face was on a train, and he was the quote unquote hype train of the expansion. And that's really when I was introduced to him. I mean, I kind of knew of the devs prior to Heart of Thorns, but certainly with Heart of Thorns, Colin was the hype person, and I have never been more excited for Guild Wars 2 than the time leading up to that expansion with him talking about it. And to put in perspective, I had quit Guild Wars 2 for about a year prior to Heart of Thorns, and it was during that year that I kept seeing videos with him talking about the new things they were doing, most importantly for me, talking about the raids and stuff like that, and I was like, okay. He's kind of the one who convinced me to come back and give Guild Wars 2 a shot, and really led me to one of the best years I ever had playing an MMO. So I'm super indebted to him, and I'm super excited that he's returning. I think there's nothing bad with this whatsoever. I think it's great. I think it's great for both him and for Arenanet to, say, hey, we're mature enough to part ways for a bit, refresh yourselves, and come back and ready to knock it out of the park. So this is super good. I'm very excited. Okay, so the next section is us hearing from Colin himself, and it's actually a pretty substantial section, so it's exciting to hear his own thoughts on this. So it says, choo-choo, so he's obviously in on the joke himself. Hello, Guild Wars community. Colin here. I'm incredibly excited to be returning to Arenanet. When I decided to leave the studio in 2016, it was one of the hardest decisions I've made in my career. I spent over 11 years working on Guild Wars franchise as a game designer and game director. One of the first projects I ever worked on at Arenanet was building a quest where you helped a little girl named Gwen find her lost flute, and the last project was leading the team through the pre-production of Guild Wars 2 Path of Fire expansion. So I think it's cool that he's kind of giving the book covers of his career so far. Guild Wars, this community, and the team at Arenanet hold a deep place in my heart, and returning feels like coming home for me. When JT reached out about the opportunity to help lead the studio with him, we spent a lot of time talking Guild Wars, its future, and our interest in driving a renewed focus on players. Bringing the player perspective into our development process is a huge part of what made Guild Wars a successful franchise from the beginning. Before we launched Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2, we opened them up to the public testing, to gather your feedback and make improvements. After they went live, we evaluated your feedback and your actions in the game, and we used that data to make a better experience for our community. We want to keep improving in this area in the future. So that's really good. I think that is something that we've seen MMOs struggle with more and more, specifically, and this kind of touches on that idea of games rushing out to release or rushing expansions out. People understand how valuable testing and betas and changes are to their games. They just typically don't actually do the actual testing and implementation of new stuff, and they say they do. They kind of set the time aside for it, but then it kind of gets scrapped at the end. Like you look at World of Warcraft, they do have betas. They do have players who play it. They have players who give the feedback, but then they're so rushed at the end that they don't implement that feedback, and that's kind of that huge missing step. So it's great to hear that Guild Wars 2 is thinking of really focusing on that part, because I think it does speak to some of the issues they've been having, where they have all of these new systems that they put into the game, and we try them out for a while, and then they kind of shift to these other systems. And, from their side of things, they might be testing things, seeing what worked from one thing and trying adding it to the next thing. But there's a bit of communication issue, at least from where I stand, where I'd like to know what is the end goal of this content? Where are we trying to go? Why are we making these changes? So if there's any kind of communication that way, I think it's super exciting, and I'm definitely on board. So talking is the easy part. It's what you do that matters. So he's getting right to it, I guess. So let's talk about a concept or a concrete step we're taking to improve on this front. Guild Wars 2 is big and complex with a lot of unique game experiences, including living world, world versus world, player versus player, endgame PvE, and more. Traditionally, the game director has had their attention split between overseeing the development of the live game and expansions. To ensure the live game is getting the attention it deserves, JT and I have created a new role that's focused on leading development strategy for the live game and ensuring that we're giving you a consistent quality experience. We felt that it was important that we found someone for the role who knew the franchise in and out and is a tireless advocate for players. I'm pleased to announce that Josh Davis, aka Grouch, has rejoined the team as the head of live operations. So that's super exciting as well. Another person coming back. I don't know Josh as well, or Grouch if you prefer. I do know that a lot of the community members have fond memories. Like, he was a more known about talkative dev, which is great. So I'm super excited that he's returning, but I'm also very excited for the role that he's going to be filling, because I do think one of the most important things is keeping that quality and that consistency from Living World chapter to Living World chapter, because we've certainly seen in the past, and this stretches quite a while in Guild Wars 2, that one Living World patch can hit it out of the park, and then the next can have maybe not as much going on for it. So having a bit of a balance there, and I'm not saying every single one's going to be the exact same, because that's just not, realistic. But having a bit of a measure there is definitely a step in the right direction. And like Colin says, a concrete step forward for the philosophy that they're trying to preach. So next we get to hear from Josh, or Grouch himself. This one's called Do It Live. Hi, Josh Grouch Davis reporting for duty. Bridging the gap between players and developers is a passion of mine, and it's part of why and how I got into the industry to begin with. When JT and Colin asked me if I'd be interested in rejoining the studio to help recenter our development efforts on players, I couldn't possibly say no. I'm stoked to partner with such a talented team of developers to write the next chapter in Guild Wars 2's story. So once again, very focused on Guild Wars 2, which is super cool to hear. It's been an eventful couple of months for the live team, starting with the summer 2021 live blog we published back in April. It's a little nerve-wracking to publish detailed release dates that far in advance. Game development can be a little bit unpredictable at times, but in general, I believe the benefits outweigh the risks, and we intend to push for this level of communication as much as we can going forward. It's new territory for Arenanet, but we're excited for about this direction. So it sounds like he was around for that summer 2021 live post. Actually, I don't know when, like, I distinctly, as I mentioned before, remember Colin leaving, and I'm just not really entirely sure when Josh left / came back, but it's super exciting to hear that he was already a part of that vision, and that he's trying to bring that into the future stuff as well. In addition to Living World Return, the roadmap announced some major additions coming to the game this summer, namely the Twisted Marionette and the Legendary Armory. We prioritize these features because we know they're important to you. You've told us as much. With that in mind, we'd like to give 2 more long-awaited updates that we know are important to many of you. So it says, alliances when? This year. World Restructuring, also known as Alliances, is a feature that aims to deliver a more balanced world versus world experience by dynamically creating matchups using World v World designated guilds. Alliances, a player-made collection of guilds, and active World v World players as the inputs. This is in comparison to the current system that relies on worlds and world linking. The system will give us more flexibility and granularity when creating new matches and help address natural fluctuations in population over time. It'll also give players more agency in choosing who they want to play with on an ongoing basis. World Restructuring is a big change to World vs. World, and we want to get it right. We've read a lot of your feedback on the system. thousands of posts over the years, it's clear that there isn't total consensus on how the feature should work, but that's okay. It's a big fundamental change to how the mode works, and that can be daunting. In the past, we've sometimes made the mistake of releasing the final version of a feature and finding that it didn't quite meet your expectations, meaning that we wasted time and resources. To avoid this, we're going to do things a little differently this time around to make sure that your voice can help inform the development of World Restructuring. World Restructuring features will be released in multi-phase beta. What this means is that we'll release a part of the World Restructuring system, test it with you live in game, gather your feedback, and then iterate on it for future release. The feature components will be functional but not fully polished, meaning we can more easily react to your feedback without having to rewrite a bunch of code. Once we've worked with you to lock down the design and implementation, we'll polish it up and take it out of beta. We'll be back in August to share an overview of how World Restructuring works and the timing of the first live beta events. Our communication regarding this feature over the last few years missed the mark. In the past, development priorities shifted away from World v. World, and unfortunately both World Restructuring and our players suffered as a result. Our new leadership team views World v. World as a cornerstone mode of Guild Wars 2, and it will be a focus of ours going forward. So that's super big, because World v. World, it's been kind of the joke in Guild Wars 2 for the longest time that World v. World is kind of the, the kid that's at the bottom of the pool that's drowned already. It's been left behind. You know, there's a lot of elements of Guild Wars 2 that are kind of set to the side, but World versus World is by far the most set to the side. And it's interesting in comparison because when you hear people like Asmongold and other people who've played some Guild Wars 2 but not a ton, World v. World is actually the thing they talk about the most. They're like, you know, Guild Wars 2 is alright, but that World v. World is actually really cool. Like, it's full-scale wars and stuff like that, which you just don't see in other games. Like, people think it's such a cool idea, and it actually works pretty well in Guild Wars 2. So if they could polish it up, if they could make it be the place to go for that kind of combat, they could definitely bring a lot of people into the game through World vs. World, which would be really exciting. And there has been changes to World vs. World over the years. We've seen, you know, the mount come into it, the legendary armor piece that came into it, and different things like that. So it's not like it hasn't received different things, but it's definitely a core functionality of the game that needs to change. So I'm interested to see that they're actually interested in trying such core changes to it and really shaking things up instead of just trying little tweaks and band-aids, which I don't think are what the system needs. Moving on to client performance optimization. This is the most exciting part of this entire blog post, in my personal opinion. If you caught the first video I did about, you know, these kind of topics last week, I talked a lot about optimization and how if there was one thing that needed to change in Guild Wars 2, it was that. It's one of the major constraining situations because a lot of people who are super into MMOs and PC gaming in general, they really hate when they can't get good performance out of the game that they're playing. It's a drag. It's not great. So let's see what's said here. We've heard you loud and clear. Guild Wars 2 needs better frame rates. We agree. We're actively working on upgrading our engine to DirectX 11, and we expect to be able to roll it out in an opt-in beta later this year. An important note is that the upgrade to DirectX 11 itself isn't a magical fix for frame rates on its own. Some players may not notice a difference at all. However, upgrading to DirectX 11 opens up a lot of doors for improving performance, CPU multi-threading for instance. It also paves the way for some potential graphic upgrades down the road. We're investing in our infrastructure, engine, and graphics because we're looking to the future. This is a long-term effort. So this is such a huge paragraph. Number one, it fully cements that they want Guild Wars 2 to have a long shelf life. Because mostly what I was talking about in my last video is that they were already having performance issues. It was only going to become more of an issue as time went on, and the game was going to only show its age more and more and more. So if they're actually able to work on optimizing and, you know, improving the current engine while the game's active, that's so impressive, and it's super good. Even if it doesn't offer a huge change for certain players right away with just the DirectX 11 implementation, it's gonna allow them to, like they say, do different things and try out new things that they wouldn't be able to in the future. So I think this is a huge change and is probably one of the most exciting updates that they've ever had. It's also great that they're just flat out hitting the nail on the head saying, we've heard this complaint, because, you know, looking at the MMO subreddit and other general MMO discussion areas, the optimization of Guild Wars 2 comes up a lot. It's similar to when you hear people talk about the Elder Scrolls Online. The number one complaint you're going to hear is the combat. When you hear about Guild Wars 2, one of the main things you're going to hear about is the optimization. So if they're able to tackle some of their lowest lows and really stabilize that player experience, this is a huge thing. All right, so we finally finish off with Until Next Time. They have a nice picture of all the dev team sort of waving, kind of in their virtual meetings, which is really cool. We're very excited for the rest of 2021 and can't wait to celebrate with you on July 27th during the Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons First Look livestream. We've got a new trailer, feature reveals and information, news about Elite Specialization beta events, and details about the story, characters, art, event design, and more. We want to make sure you have many secrets to discover when you visit Cantha for yourself, so while we won't be spoiling things, we will have lots to share between now and release. We've planned more Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons live streams throughout the rest of 2021, and they'll each bring you more news about the expansion. Our community is the lifeblood of all that we do. Thank you for being a part of it. Ruby, JT, Colin, Josh, and the Arenanet team. So this is super exciting. There's a few things here. Number one, Elite Specializations have been confirmed for End of Dragons. I don't think anyone was thinking we'd get an expansion without them. And maybe it has been confirmed before this, but I like seeing it in writing, even if it's been multiple times. Like, Elite Specializations are such a requirement for this game. It makes it, you know, it adds a new way to play your character, which is such an important thing. New combinations of ways to like integrate different specs together. It's so big. I know it's probably one of the most difficult things to add because of all the balance they probably have to do to make it work, but hey. Really exciting to hear we're going to get a new trailer, and feature reveals is probably the most important thing for me. I love hearing about features. I mean, it's often the features that make an expansion so important. I mean, you look at Path of Fire, the mounts, right? You look at Heart of the Thorns, I think of gliding, I think of the raids and stuff like that. Features are so key, and I can't wait to see what we're getting. The very final piece of this is a beautiful screenshot of the in-game engine showing what looks to be Cantha. It looks spectacular. I mean, say what you will about Guild Wars 2 and its graphics, but they know art. Like, it looks so beautiful, and it's truly stunning to see new places, and I think that's the most exciting thing. Guild Wars 2 does exploration so well, and just having a huge bunch of new maps to go and wander through is a gift on its own. So I'm super excited about the game. I wasn't unexcited about the game before. I was just excited to see it maybe go a different way. So I'm excited that they kind of confirmed, or, you know, really announced their intentions with Guild Wars 2. They made it super clear in this post. And having more posts like this in the future will only be a good thing for the game. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this as well. I look forward to having more conversations with you in the comments below, so please feel free to share your thoughts. Toss the video a like if you did enjoy it. And if you're new to the game or new to Guild Wars 2 and you're looking to get into it, you will find some referral links, or sponsored links I should say, in the comments below. I am a Guild Wars 2 or Arenanet partner, so when you do use those links, they do help support the channel. And they don't cost you anything additional, and the actual base game's free, so one of them's completely free anyways, so there you go. But thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.